Great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience and welcome here. Welcome to this session where we will talk about the Positive Racial Identity Program. And you will hear more about the Philly Environmental Scan. My name is Carol Austin, and I am the Executive Director First Up. And we're just really delighted to have you here today. And I know we have among us some folk who are probably educators and funders and partner organizations and the like. And later on today, we'll get more of a sense of that. But I just wanted to share with you a bit about what you can expect today and in terms of today's session. But first of all, as I said, my name is Carol Austin. I'm the Executive Director First Up. And for those of you who are not familiar with us, we're an organization whose origins began back in 1967 when a progressive group of early childhood educators founded what would become the Delaware Valley Association for the Education of Young Children. And to raise the profile of early childhood educators and to advance quality programs in this region. And since then, First Up's name has changed, but our work to enhance the quality of early childhood education in southeastern Pennsylvania has remained steadfast. Our vision is that we have a society in which early childhood professionals are highly skilled, are valued, a society where families have the knowledge, the capabilities, and the resources to guide their children's learning, and a vision that every young child has a quality start that lasts a lifetime. To address these needs and fulfill our mission, we work closely with up to 6,000 early childhood professionals every year, and they reach up to 50,000 children every year. And consistent with our progressive roots, you're here to find out about this progressive initiative called the Positive Racial Identity Program and the Philadelphia Environmental Scan. Guided by the 2016 P.R.I.D.E Pittsburgh Environmental Scan, current literature on race and early childhood, and the dedicated work of the P.R.I.D.E program and First Up over the past 6 years, our focus has been on understanding the status of positive racial identity in Philadelphia, and we aim to raise awareness about the benefits of cultivating positive racial identity in young Black children. We want to increase access to support for both education professionals and to families, and we want to examine current policies in Philadelphia. P.R.I.D.E, positive racial identity work is critical in Philadelphia. It requires funding for training, increased answers and resources. So that is really powerful. Let me take a quick look here. Okay, good. I'm adjusting my camera just a little bit so you can see me a little better. Okay, so that's the work that we do. And today in the webinar, you're going to hear from several people who are going to be further introduced as we progress. You'll hear from Dr. Aisha White, who's the principal author of the Philly Environmental Scan, who will share about why this work is important, and she'll provide you with a context for the scan. You'll also hear from Lisa Brown, who will give an overview of the key findings from the scan. And you'll hear from a panel of teachers about their experiences engaging in this work. And we'll have Jessica Cochran facilitate that panel. Then you'll also hear from our funder, Kelly Brown. So you hear funders' perspective on why funders should engage in this work and ways various constituents can engage. And there'll also be opportunities for question and answer. And we actually invite you to put your questions in the Q&A box, that Q&A section, at any point throughout the session today. And we're asking that you not put questions in the chat because we will be pulling them from there. Please use the chat to engage with one another and to make comments and engage in this process in that way. But please, all questions in the Q&A. And as I said, we'll have several opportunities. We'll have at least one opportunity, maybe two opportunities throughout the morning or the afternoon for you to really be able to, for us to answer questions. So finally, today's conversation may be triggering for some of you. And overall, this is a sensitive topic, given in America, we're not exactly comfortable talking about race. So this is a sensitive topic that's been a lightning rod for politicians and for pundits of late. To that end, we're asking that you please be respectful and considerate in your comments here in the chat, as well as considerate and respectful in your questions. So to get this show on the road, I am excited to introduce Dr. Aisha White, the director of the P.R.I.D.E program based at the University of Pittsburgh. Dr. White plays a pivotal role in guiding the P.R.I.D.E program's overall direction, including professional development and curriculum development, a role in research and fundraising efforts, and she's been a critical leader in us developing our own programming here in Philadelphia and expanding the great work she began. Dr. White was the principal author of the environmental scan that you have access to and that you'll hear some more about today. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Aisha White.
Okay, so you're hearing my voice while the technical setup for the video is being sorted out. Thanks for that kind introduction, Carol, and good afternoon again, everyone, and welcome. We are so very grateful that you've chosen to take time away from your busy schedules to be with us this afternoon. And I want to quickly start by thanking P.R.I.D.E's major funders, the Hillman Foundation, the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, the Heinz Endowments, and the Pittsburgh Foundation for all their funding support of our work over the years. So I have a number of talking points that will start things off today. So in the interest of time, I'll jump right into them. I also would like to mention that the chat is actually disabled. So if you have questions or if you have comments, you might need to put those in the Q&A section of the Zoom resources. I think it makes sense to begin by dispelling common misconceptions about children and race. I would guess that since you're joining this webinar, you are aware that children begin to notice the markers of race at a very early age. You may not know exactly when. It begins as young as 3 months old, when children are actually noticing those physical markers. Things like skin color, hair texture, eye shape, other facial features. That noticing and sense-making progresses through infancy into toddlerhood and to the pre-K ages and beyond. So the literature tells us that major changes are happening at 3 months, at 6 to 9 months, at 2.5 to 3, really significant changes between 4 and 5, and those changes continue throughout children's development up to age around 11 or 12, when some of their ideas about race can become solidified. And we can speak to that later. If anybody's interested in more specifics about this research, we include it in our P.R.I.D.E training. So if you want more information, you can always reach out to us. Unfortunately, most educators and parents don't know that the noticing occurs so early. And according to a recent article by the American Psychological Association titled, "Children Notice Race Several Years Before Adults Want to Talk About It," they state that even if adults don't talk to children about race, they do come up with their own ideas, which may be inaccurate and detrimental. I'll repeat that, inaccurate and detrimental. And that naturally brings me to my second talking point, which has to do with why this work is so important. So the work we do at P.R.I.D.E is unapologetically focused on Black children aged 0 to 8. We have some pretty solid reasons for focusing in this way that I won't get into, but what I'd like to do instead is have you indulge me for a moment and think about a Black child. So it could be any child, your own, niece, nephew, grandchildren, adopted children. Just imagine that child and what that child looks like. I think I would like for you to think about the fact that they are so easily identifiable as Black. So think about that. I've already talked about how children notice things early on, and now we're talking about Black children specifically, how the markers of race are so noticeable and easily identifiable for them. That in and of itself is not a problem. That has really to do with race. It does not have to do with racism. Racism, on the other hand, has to do with the values that people attach to that identification. So consider the process. Children are identified as Black, and because of racism in America, negative values and attitudes and ideas are attached to those children. And because of those values and attitudes and ideas, it's more likely that Black children will have racialized experiences from multiple fronts. These experiences could happen to children on the playground, in the classroom, anywhere practically. And they involve interactions, unfortunately, with other Black children who have racialized ideas, with other children of color, and with white children. These same children are also having these experiences with adults. So they may be engaging with a teacher who is not aware at all of their own unconscious biases. Or they simply may be in places where teachers just don't even know how to protect them from racialized harm. Another space in which children may have these experiences, unfortunately, could also be with their families. And what I mean by that is not that parents are engaging in racialized language and behavior towards their children, even though that can happen, particularly with parents who suffer from colorism. What happens is parents are already dealing with their own racism as adults. So they're having either direct or indirect experiences with race, or they're dealing with the byproducts of racism, things like difficult and low-paying jobs, under-resourced communities. All of these things kind of coalesce and affect parents' parenting practices and the quality of their interactions with their children. Anybody's interested in more information about that, there's some literature on the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard website that talks specifically about how racism affects the way adults interact with children. So what does P.R.I.D.E do, having said all that? Well, P.R.I.D.E puts front and center the issue of race. So again, unapologetically talking about race and Black children. It gives teachers proactive strategies for starting conversations with children, knowing what books to use and how to use them. It builds teachers' knowledge and skills in understanding race, both internally and externally. Our work involves the same kind of focus with parents, who our program provides with historical information that helps them understand their condition, understands the history of these biases that have emerged in America towards skin color and hair texture, et cetera. And it provides home activities that parents can engage in with their children so that those parent-child interactions are enhanced and improved. And additionally, what P.R.I.D.E does is provide parents with ways to advocate for their children. I think it's safe to say that this work is critical and it should be continued for a number of reasons. One in particular is because we have barely scratched the surface. There are so many segments of the early childhood world that are not changing enough or changing quickly enough. And there are populations of educators and parents who are not being reached. And we still haven't seen the kind of systemic change that the field needs when it comes to race. If anybody has any questions about all I've said so far, it is a lot. Feel free to ask questions when we get to the Q&A section. But right now, what I'd like to do is shift gears and talk very briefly about the Philadelphia scan, which again, Lisa will get into more detail on later on. So from the very beginning, the P.R.I.D.E team understood that the Philadelphia environmental scan needed to have features that distinguished it from the Pittsburgh study. And so we attempted to do that in a couple ways. First, by including a lot more historical background about the Philadelphia region. And then second, by building in more information about the current early childhood environment and conditions in Philly that includes content describing all the hard work of organizations and programs in the Philadelphia area. You know, when you do this kind of work, it can be easy to find negative information because there's so much of it. Things around children in poverty, homelessness, lack of access to care and education. But I think it's equally important to include information that is more positive and that also shows how much hard work is happening in a particular region. There were also a few differences in the methodology of the Philadelphia study compared to the Pittsburgh study. For example, in Pittsburgh, we pulled together a local advisory committee to help us navigate the process and report out the findings. That's something that wasn't really possible in Philly. And in addition, one of the Pittsburgh study team members, Dr. Shannon Wallace, who's the head of the Office of Child Development, was doing research on racial interactions in Pittsburgh public school classrooms, and that data was included in the Pittsburgh study and obviously does not appear in the Philadelphia work. Additionally, because of the geographic distance, we're on one end of the state, Philly's on the other end of the state, none of the Philadelphia SCAN focus groups were held in person, even though they were just as engaging, just as enlightening, and just as personable in the virtual spaces that we created. I should add that there were more focus groups conducted for the Philadelphia SCAN than for the Pittsburgh SCAN. So in Pittsburgh, I believe we conducted about 4 focus groups with parents, 2 with teachers. In Philly, the number was closer to 10 or 11, split somewhat evenly. And some of those focus groups were conducted by the First Up team. I'll wrap up my remarks by speaking to the significance of positive racial identity development and early education. And for me, in thinking about the significance, what that means is what does it mean to support positive racial identity, and what is the effect of supporting positive racial identity? Taking on the challenge of helping children understand race and develop a positive racial identity means for professionals and parents that they will have to be honest and courageous. By honest, I mean they have to accept the facts and the research, both of which demonstrate the same things over and over and over again. Children see race and are affected by racism. It requires the courage to enter into this journey, knowing that it will be hard, it will be frustrating and discouraging at times, but also that it will be more affirming and rewarding and amazing than they ever imagined. And it means that everyone involved in this work should accept they will have to be patient, because this work takes a whole lot of time and effort, and it's certainly worth it all. The effect is children who are healthier, children who are grounded in their own race, history, heritage, children who feel good about themselves, who are better equipped to embrace and accept people who are different from them. And on top of all this, there's even more, because the research has consistently demonstrated a plethora of benefits correlated with having a positive racial identity, including, but not limited to, better grades, higher grade point average, higher test scores, increased self-esteem, enhanced resilience, improved behavior in school, better retention of factual information, and heightened problem-solving skills. I'll close by saying that we shouldn't wait to help children understand race. We already know we're late in the game now. We don't need to wait until they're in their teens to support them in sorting through their identity. And we can't wait for the field or the society to catch up. We really must put this work front and center if we are to live up to our call to fully meet the needs of all children and families. I'm happy again to speak in more detail to all of this in our time together this afternoon. But for now, I'll get off my soapbox and introduce our next speaker. I am more than pleased to introduce Lisa Brown, the Director of Family and Equity Initiatives at First Up. Lisa oversees a dynamic portfolio of programs dedicated to dismantling inequities and actively promoting inclusive practices within early childhood education. Lisa was the key project leader doing so much of this recruitment, data gathering, as well as focus group documentation and facilitation. You name it, she did it. Please join us in welcoming Lisa Brown.
Thank you very much, Dr. White. for that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Before I get started, I wanted to gently remind you to please go ahead and place your questions in the Q&A section, and please keep those questions coming. I'm thrilled to be here with all of you today to share key insights from Pride in Philly family and educator surveys, the parent and teacher focus groups, the interviews with our key informants that are early care and education professionals. It has been such a joy to connect with and learn from real life educators and families of young Black children in Philadelphia. We are grateful for the valuable contributions which help us better support positive racial identity development in early education. Let me go ahead and lay down some foundation and start by letting you know that we have received electronic surveys from 142 parents who captured their ideas, opinions, and knowledge about young children and race. The parent participants represented a diverse range of racial backgrounds, including Black or African American, white or Caucasian, biracial, Latino, Latina, and Latine, Asian or Pacific Islander, Greek, and Caribbean. Additionally, a portion of those respondents chose not to include their race. Now, while we could sit here and I could get into all of the insights, I only have 10 minutes. So I'm going to highlight a choice portion of the information we learned, then give you a brief overview. Let's go ahead and start with those parent surveys. 56% of parents mentioned that their own children talk about race. 27% of parents felt they had the right words to respond to their children's comments about race, with many feeling somewhat prepared to respond occasionally. Nearly all parents agreed that children need to recognize racial differences in age-appropriate terms and prepare for discrimination. Interestingly, the concept of being colorblind drew mixed reactions. While over half disagreed with the idea, just over 1/4 strongly agreed. When it comes to discussing race with children aged 1 to 8, nearly 100% of the parents agreed that it is necessary. Many parents express a need for more resources to facilitate these questions. The survey also highlighted parents' concerns and experiences. Less than 30% felt they had the right words to address hurtful racial comments that their children might encounter. 61% of parents 61% of the parents believe that teachers should discuss race in pre-K classrooms, and 51% think their child's teacher is already doing so. However, only 22% felt teachers talk about race frequently. We also conducted focus groups with 20 parents, primarily African American or of African descent. They shared their own racial experiences, often recalling sporadic conversations about race during their own childhood. Many parents felt that having more conversations about race with their own parents would have been helpful and better prepared them for discussions with their children. So Philadelphia parents, we heard you when you said, programming is essential to help you learn ways to support your children in dealing with racialized experiences. We know that we need to equip parents with strategies to proactively communicate about their heritage, race, culture, and ethnicity. You also shared that creating mechanisms for parents to connect and learn from each other about race and positive racial identity development is vital. Suggestions of a resource portal providing access to information that supports parents in building their children's positive racial identity would be immensely beneficial. I told you I had 10 minutes, so let's jump into the educators' perspectives real quick. 100 teachers responded to the Pride in Philly electronic survey. The majority identified as Black, with a smaller percentage identifying as other races. Educational levels represented included some teachers with high school diplomas, associate degrees, more participants holding bachelor's or master's degrees, and one teacher with a doctorate. Interestingly, only 33% felt their coursework adequately prepared them to think about how race affects teaching and learning. In the classroom, 47% of teachers said children talk about race, with most comments being positive or neutral. 77% of the teachers expressed a willingness to participate in future race-related professional development. We also conducted focus groups with 35 early childhood educators who expressed genuine interest in this topic. Many described a color-blind approach to teaching about race or focusing on equality. And no teachers reported engaging in anti-bias or anti-racist teaching. Teachers shared that children notice differences such as skin color, hair texture, and language, but often lack structured guidance on addressing these observations. They also highlighted the need for more support for resources to foster positive racial identity development. In partnership with educators, we discovered a critical need to raise awareness within the early education community in Philadelphia about race and young children. Building on the racial awareness and trauma-informed work already being carried out by First Up, we must enhance our efforts to educate and support early educators. So that was a lot of information. I'm wrapping up, but there are two more areas of key insights we learned. It's the early childhood programs first. Early childhood programs benefit when higher level administrators commit to building their own racial awareness. This commitment enables them to discuss issues with staff effectively and foster a supportive culture for racial awareness. Schools should also have opportunities to build professional learning communities that provide teachers with ongoing support to integrate content addressing race and culture into early education training and practices. We also learned that there is a need for scholars to engage in racial ethnic identity studies with children 8 years and under. Bridging the gap between research, literature, and knowledge acquired by direct service educators is crucial. Last but not least, policymakers play a significant role in establishing policies that promote teachers learning about young children and race, as well as positive racial identity development. They should engage in strategies to bring knowledge about race and young children to scale and develop statewide policy changes to advance this work. All of this information and more is available to you in the environmental scan, which is available on the First Up website. However, we will share a QR code later in the program. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to our discussion on how we can continue to support and enhance positive racial identity development in early education. At this time, please allow me to introduce Medina Jackson, who will be selecting questions from the Q&A section. Medina is the Director of Engagement at the P.R.I.D.E program. She oversees the P.R.I.D.E Pop-Up Mini Art Festival, Speaker Series, the Program Advisory Committee, and supports Parent Village activities. Additionally, Medina co-facilitates P.R.I.D.E professional development sessions and works diligently to raise awareness and increase the visibility of the P.R.I.D.E program. Her roles involve creating and strengthening community partnerships and collaboratively developing activities that build stronger community connections. Medina, are there questions in the Q&A at this time?
Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm so very excited to be here with all of you. Yes, we do have a question in the Q&A section, and I would encourage all of our participants, everyone who can hear us, to continue sharing your questions in the Q&A section. So I'd like to direct this question to Lisa and Aisha. This person, Marie Davis, is from a Philly center. So first, Marie wants to know how they can get involved, how their center can get involved with P.R.I.D.E work, and what's the best way to do that, which is so exciting because we want to keep spreading the P.R.I.D.E word and principles and work. And then their second question is, they work in low-income centers, and it's hard to provide families with the vocabulary to use with their children and grandchildren because they've used the improper vocabulary for so long. How can I encourage them to change?
So Lisa, do you want to respond to the first part of the question, and then we'll see what we can do with the second part?
I would love that. Marie, we are so excited that you are in this space. You're in the right place. Exciting news for Philadelphia is that if you go onto the First Up website, which I shared before, we'll be sharing again, we are actually providing the 5-part training series completely free. And we offer that virtually as well as in person. We do also run a teacher cohort here in Philadelphia. And our next application cycle, where teachers participate in a year-long teacher cohort where they meet monthly with 14 other teachers across Philadelphia, and they really deeply engage in the Pride principles, and then really look at how can we incorporate and integrate this into our classrooms and our classroom practices. That is also, it's an application process, and so we definitely invite and encourage educators across Philadelphia to apply. And so I invite you to look out for that in October. And then apart from that, we do actually have some offerings right now in Philadelphia where we piloted some affinity group work with families of Black children. And we're looking for sites to host us. This way, your teachers and your leadership are involved and taking on the learning of the Pride work. And then you also get to make that home connection where we would literally, again, this is completely free. It's 6 sessions as far as the affinity groups with families. And so I invite you to go to the website and be in contact with our team. We are looking forward to serving you.
Thanks, Lisa. It's a little bit hard to respond adequately to the question without maybe an example. And I don't know if you feel like you can quickly jot something down in the Q&A that gives us an example of the what you refer to as improper vocabulary. But as you think about that and maybe enter that information, I think part of what parents need to try to better understand is that their initial conversation should really be exploratory. That is, asking questions of children rather than giving children directives. So it could be that the directives are using that improper language, and the approach should shift to one where they are asking children questions about what they did in school. If they created a picture, for example, tell me about the picture. What about the skin color that's on the picture? And just asking children to share their thoughts, because what we found in a lot of our work is that children have lots and lots of ideas and thoughts and those conclusions that I alluded to earlier, but they don't express them. So I think really the starting point, in addition to what Lisa has offered, is to try to encourage parents to start asking children questions. You, as a professional, will have to help them figure out what those questions are and how to frame those questions. Because what we also have found is that parents have not gotten information or training or been engaged in practicing these kind of conversations. So a lot of times they don't know where to start. So they start where they are. And in your case, it looks like they're starting from a place that needs a little bit of improvement and a little bit of education and practice. So I hope that helps a little.
Thank you, Dr. White and Lisa. And I've got one more question for this time before we move on to our next segment. And this looks like it's coming from a parent named Daniel. My 29-month-old daughter asked me what color she is and what color was her classmate who is white. I was not sure if I should introduce ethnicity concepts like Black and white, or if I should respond with introducing ethnicity and tell her that she is brown and her classmate is beige. So they're looking for some advisement there. What do y'all think?
Yeah, they are right on point, because she would not understand Black, not at 29 months. That's a way too abstract concept. So another thing that this parent might want to do is think about coming up with some fun labels, maybe asking the child what they think they would like to call their skin, giving them some options if they don't come up with them on their own. There are some folks who feel like assigning food names to skin color is not appropriate. I don't. I think it's fine. I think a lot of parents have been doing it for a long time. So a chocolate bar, a cinnamon stick, you come up with fun labels for it. Let the child come up with their own labels for it. But I think you're on point in offering something that is concrete. The more abstract, the less likely it is that they will understand it. So I think that you're right on target.
All right, thanks to you both for answering those questions. And don't worry, audience, we'll be back with another Q&A segment, so keep those questions coming. Now I'm going to transition to our panel discussion. And I'm delighted to introduce you to Jessica Cochran, who is the training coordinator at the P.R.I.D.E program in Pittsburgh. Jessica conducts research to support best practices in P.R.I.D.E training development and delivery concerning race and young children. She co-facilitates the P.R.I.D.E teacher cohort and supports professional development trainings. Her expertise in child development and race enables her to enhance our art activities for the annual pop-up art festivals. Additionally, Jessica creates, manages, and develops marketing resources for P.R.I.D.E training initiatives. So I'll turn it over to Jessica Cochran for our panel discussion with our educators.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Medina. Hi, everyone. I'm honored to be a part of this discussion today. And while cameras are getting turned on, it is my privilege to be able to introduce you to our incredible panelists for this next section. We have 4 educators joining us from Pittsburgh and Philly. So I'm going to begin by introducing Jerome Morris, a 40-year Homewood resident and educator with over 25 years of experience, specializes in primary literacy, teacher collaboration, and pro-Black pedagogy, informed by his studies at multiple universities and membership in African-centered intellectual organizations. Welcome, Jerome. Next, we have Katie Carroll, an educator in Pittsburgh Public Schools for 32 years. She holds advanced degrees in education, has served in various educational roles, received the Roy A. Hunt Award, and is a leader in how a white teacher can be a loving and effective educator for Black children. Next, we have Jenaba Dia. She was born and raised in Senegal, is a passionate advocate for inclusivity with over 9 years of childcare experience and a bachelor's degree in early childhood education from Arcadia University. Inspired by her rich cultural heritage and dedicated to nurturing children's curiosity and joy. And last but not least, we have Joe Grimm, an educator with a passion for literacy, social emotional learning, and social justice, currently teaching at the Western Learning Center with extensive experience working with Philadelphia youth, holding advanced degrees in art history, creative writing, and English language literature. So now we're going to move into a time of discussion with our panelists, and I have a question for each of you. So please share your thoughts for a few minutes, and then we'll move on to the next person. I'm going to begin with a question for Joe. So Joe, as stated, the findings in the environmental scan point to a need for further awareness to be raised in educational settings regarding children's racial development. What has been the most impactful aspect of growth in your journey, specifically caring for children's positive racial identity?
Thanks for the question, and hi everyone. Thanks for inviting me to be here. It's been really informative and exciting to hear everything so far, and I look forward to hearing what everyone else has to say as well. So Lisa shared the questions, and I've been kind of kicking around some thoughts for the last couple days. And then yesterday, I also participated in a workshop with Spark about developmentally appropriate practice in early childhood ed. And so I think I've been thinking a lot about how P.R.I.D.E has really shifted for me how I approach developmentally appropriate practice, and thinking about how, like, talking with young children about racial identity and helping them to like ask those questions, like Dr. White was just saying, I feel like it's such a critical part of developmentally appropriate practice. We think about helping young children gain the confidence and language and support and love that they really need to form their own identity and their own early interests and their own self-concept, but then also to create a really loving classroom community where the community can hold each other up and really develop a love of learning together and a sense of a learning community. I think that Pride is just such a core piece of that. And I think that it really shifted for me with Pride from thinking about, talking about young kids with race or making sure we had a diverse representation of, people and cultures in the classroom, whether that be through books or visuals. I think like a lot of times other conversations I've been a part of before, and then kind of my own thinking forming out of that. The racial identity piece had often been like an add-on, like let's make sure we're doing this, but also, add on the racial identity piece. And instead of it now being like, again, I kind of think about it as a core piece, like we have to do this first, and it's got to be at the foundation. And it's really kind of become a part of my approach to developmentally appropriate practice as instead of like an add-on. So yeah, I think that's kind of been how I've been thinking about it more recently, and kind of reflecting on all the different experiences I've had as an educator, and then how the Pride program and being part of that work has changed my approach. So thanks.
Thank you, Joe. I love that language of creating it as your core approach instead of an add-on. Thank you for sharing that. We're going to move on to our next question for Katie. So Katie, in your over 32 years of experience working with young children, what racially positive practices that you have implemented do you feel like have been the most beneficial to your students, and why?
That's a big question, but I think starting with the fact that we're a lot of education now is dealing with test scores, and we want data, and taking a step back and realizing that child development is really where we need to be. And taking words from what Aisha said, we need things that are concrete. We need advocates for children. So I think I take the identity part of Pride and really do a lot of work with that. Books are a big part of what I do, and making sure that children see themselves in the books that we read and that we use for our education during the day. And making sure that they use that identity to feel good about themselves and be able to see themselves in what we do, also be able to create themselves in what we do. So we do a lot of art, visual art, movement art. We use poetry, we use vocabulary. So when we're doing something like a painting, trying to figure out skin tone, what we talk about melanin, we talk about hair texture, we talk about all the things words that they need to use when they go out into the world, words that they will hear when they go out into the world, and making sure they feel the pride in themselves that they are part of that, and that they know how to have those kinds of conversations. I also think using their creativity. They're naturally curious, they're naturally creative. So being able to put themselves in a creative space and being able to say, this is who I am. And that's really the big motivating factor, that I want them to say, this is who I am, and that the world accepts them for who they are. And so that they can love themselves, be able to put themselves out there, and be able to say, this is me, and I like me, so you better like me.
I love that, Katie. Thank you for sharing. I know you do so much in your classroom, so it's an honor to get to hear a little bit about it. Next, we have Jerome. I have a question for you. I know, Jerome, you've spent several years infusing Afrocentric practices in your classroom. So can you speak a little bit about how you feel your teaching approach has adapted to focusing on children's positive racial identity development in your classroom?
That's a big question. I'm gonna try to put 30 years of effort into 3 minutes of talking. You use the language infusing Afrocentric practices, but really what I'm trying to do is infuse Africa into my practice as a practitioner who studied Africa for 30 some years. I think Africa gives us a really nice recipe on human development. And Katie mentioned that now education kind of focuses on these systems for student productivity and has gotten away from practitioners focused on child development or human development. And so I've thought about all of these ways that Africa kind of gives us a roadmap for how to do that. And so I've been working on that. And this is where P.R.I.D.E comes in. P.R.I.D.E is this like formal forum for us as practitioners to kind of think and wonder about the well-being of students, and not stress about the technologies for production. And I'm just following in the footsteps of people like Amos Wilson and Asa Hilliard and Wade Boykins and all of those people. So it's been a journey. It's an effort. Um, Again, I try to focus on pieces of Africa that I think are important for human development right now. Value systems like Ma'at and Guzasaba, symbolisms that comes with Andinkra. We deal with proverbs and folk tales and Sawubona and all of those African pieces that adds to human development. And so again, I don't know if I could do 30 years into 3 minutes, but that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you, Jerome. And we have a question next for Jeneba. Jeneba, your project for the teacher cohort was so comprehensive across multiple disciplines. It was truly incredible. Could you briefly describe your project and one way you feel educators could continue this model in their own practice?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Jessica. Thank you for the question. So my teacher cohort project focused on the P.R.I.D.E team, learning about my roots, and where we focus on exploring the diaspora. As you know that I am from Senegal and have lived in America for years. As a teacher, I love sharing about my culture, and I approach this project same way I did a rice study with preschoolers over 3 months, which allowed me to share my personal identity while also inviting the children and their families to share about their rice stories, recipes, connection to their roots as well. My family is from Senegal. We own a rice farm, so I had videos and photographs of how rice is cultivated in my country and shared this with my classroom and the families in my class. So how rice is grown is a staple food in Senegal. And many African countries, I brought in recipes that we followed weekly because we make rice in so many different ways in Senegal, and it didn't stop there. Because when the children and families brought in their recipes and we actually made the rice book, I could say more about it. I'll end by saying that at the end of our rice exploration, which was months, we had the rice potluck and every family participated, which is like we have 20 families in my classroom. Every single one of them came to this rice potluck and they made all different kind of rice that means to what it, and it have each rice recipe have a story behind it, what it means to their family and how they eat it at the tables. And so I integrated element of personal story, history, hands-on learning, literature, science, and social studies, providing a comprehensive and engaging learning experience for my student and myself. They are still talking about it until this day. Even yesterday, one kid said, "Can we have a rice party again?" And all the children started chanting, "Rice party, rice party." So one way I think educators can continue this teaching approach is by integrating their own interests, culture, and finding commonalities with their students, families, or communities, and incorporating real-world topics of interest and culturally relevant material into the curriculum, allowing a student to explore and connect with the content on a deeper level. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Geneva. We have a few more minutes left, and so I want to sneak in some questions and open it up to all of you, if that's okay. So the first question I'm going to ask, and anyone can chime in and answer, is what is one way you feel the education system can do better to serve our Black children? It's a big question. And some of you have already touched on a little bit on this, but any thoughts there?
So we should create more pride in Philly teacher cohort for teachers to learn alongside each other. And we should collaborate with families for the Pride teacher cohort in childcare. In our school, we have a DEI community that I'm an active member of, and we are having this conversation with the teachers and with the families. I think we should have more of that, like the family affirmative groups for Pride Project.
So when you say the educational system, I think that the academies that we come out of, whether they be the University of Pittsburgh or the University of Penn, it could be Temple or Chatham or Duquesne or Drexel, I don't think they adequately cover human development. And so when we talk about the educational system, we have to put additional focus on that after academy learning. And so having structures like P.R.I.D.E, where practitioners can get together and share their work. It's almost like we have a theater to share and rehearse with each other about what we're doing in schools. We can spend a lot of time sort of protesting or asking the academies to do better. But in my career, it's those organizations like P.R.I.D.E, like First Up, that creates these structures for teachers to grapple with those deep human development theories and then apply them and get feedback from their peers along the way. So I think that's something we have to kind of start to think about.
Thank you, Jerome. And thank you, Geneva. Last question, and then we'll move on to our next section. Anyone can answer. What is just one piece of encouragement or advice that you want to leave educators who are listening or will be listening to this recording with to encourage them to focus in on racially positive identity development with Black children?
I say be bold. And do what you know is right for your students. Aisha talked about advocating, and especially at early childhood, nobody's going to advocate for them except you. So do what you know is right for them and be bold in your choices.
Thank you, Katie. Anyone else want to speak to that before we move on?
So I think the one key of advice is to be intentional and authentic in our approach of teaching. And don't be afraid of bringing in your own culture into your classroom. Like we as educators, like we need to bring in our own self, our whole identity when we come to the classroom.
I think mine's is simple. Just be reminded that it's a people business, right? When you sift through the money, the politics, the policies, education is a people business.
I would just add really quick to that. I echo what the other presenters said, and I also think that like ask for help, like ask other people to, if you have questions, like show your project, ask what you're thinking, ask other teachers, like, are you seeing this in your classroom too? Because I think like a lot of people are probably more interested or more willing to get involved and maybe just a little more hesitant to get started. So like ask for help and bring others in with you.
Wow. So we have be bold, advocate, be intentional, bring your whole self, education is a people business, and don't be afraid to ask for help. I cannot thank you all enough for taking time to talk with us. I've learned so much. I have so many notes. So thank you. It is now time for us to engage in a Q&A session, which will be skillfully facilitated by Medina Jackson.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be back here. I know we're hearing so many wonderful key insights for this session. So I'm just going to share a couple of mine, and just feel free to continue to add your questions to the Q&A, not in any raised hand feature, only in the Q&A section, please. So a couple of key takeaways that I'm hearing, and for all of us to remember. One coming from Carol is based on the vision of First Up, that every young child having a quality start is a noble mission, and them having a positive racial identity is a huge part of that and whole child development. And then another key insight from Dr. Aisha White, where she said, what impacts Black children is not their beautiful Blackness, but the negative ideas, attitudes, and associations assigned to them based on their beautiful Blackness. Racism impacts how adults interact with young Black children, which is why so much of our focus is on adults who work with and care for young Black children. So at this time, you are familiar with most of our panelists, Dr. Aisha White, Carol Austin, Jessica Cochran, and myself, but I am thrilled to introduce Kelly Brown, a senior program officer at the William Penn Foundation, who will also be joining us for this rich discussion. Kelly manages grant making under the Children and Families Program, focusing on advancing early childhood education and mental and behavioral health services objectives. Kelly represents our lead funder, the William Penn Foundation, which has generously supported the P.R.I.D.E and Philly Environmental Scan Project. Kelly's involvement with this initiative began years ago when she attended the annual First Up conference and heard Dr. White present on positive racial identity development. So glad that connection was made. This sparked a conversation between her and Carol Austin, leading to the pivotal event we are hosting today. Thanks to Kelly and the William Penn Foundation, we now have comprehensive research specific to Philadelphia and actionable recommendations to advance our mission. So I'm gonna get the questions started, and like I said, continue to add your questions to the Q&A. We've got 2 so far. So this first question is going to Kelly and Carol. And since I just introduced Kelly, I'm hoping Kelly can start us off, and then Carol, you can chime in. So this question comes from Tasha Blalock from Trust for Learning. Is there an opportunity for quality initiatives such as Keystone Stars to learn from and incorporate P.R.I.D.E into their model?
Thanks for that question, Medina and Tasha. Thanks so much for being in the room. We appreciate your energy and your thoughtfulness, given where Trust for Learning really sits in our ECE space. I absolutely think that there is opportunity for quality rating and improvement systems, not only Keystone Stars, but in other states as well, to really lean into what it means to center culturally relative pedagogy and interaction and engagement. I'll talk a little bit more during my call to action about how we as a foundation really needed to be innovative about how we manage this work, how we welcomed it into our strategy. But I think that one of the things we could do is focus on assessment tools that do center real experiences, observation tools that center experiences that focus on cultural interaction. Some of our assessment tools that we use now are not race sensitive. And I think that work like Dr. Stephanie Curenton, Dr. Ioma Iroka, apologize for butchering her name. But I think that work that has been started should absolutely be continued around how we study children's interactions and how teachers should be responsive. So I think that would be a great start in terms of shifting how our quality rating work really supports the needs of all children. I hope that answered your question.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. And I will say, Tasha, that when we decided to really push forward and promote, this work here in Philadelphia, that was at the very start of it. Our thinking was, how can we change the system and shift the system? And that this needs to be included in certainly in our quality rating system in Pennsylvania. So I'll let you know, we've been having those conversations. We've started those conversations. Keystone Stars is going to be going through a revisioning process. There are a lot of other changes that we had that was, I think, originally supposed to start next year. I'm not sure if it is going to start next year, but I want you to rest assured that certainly here, we have started those conversations, and we're committed to moving forward those conversations, because I think we all can appreciate we're in a different world, and we really do need to rethink how we teach, how we learn. And I think, to Kelly's point, the assessment tools and systems that we are utilizing so that every child can have what they need and can really benefit from the highest quality care and education possible. So thank you for that. Thank you for surfacing that as an issue.
Thank you, Kelly and Carol. We're going to keep things rolling. We have another great question. And this question is going to be for Dr. Aisha White. And if anyone else has a contribution here, feel free to chime in. So the question is from Shamika Brown. Do you see a difference in racial discrimination between boys and girls? Are there subtle or major differences in the age-appropriate conversations between Black boys and girls?
So thanks for the question, Shamika. I'll speak to the second part of the question first. My research has not uncovered differences in what would be appropriate conversations based on gender within Black children. So that the answer to that essentially at this point is no, but that only means I have not uncovered that. That doesn't mean it is not out there. What I will say though is I do vaguely recall learning that the ways in which parents socialize their children, Black children, is different based on gender. So there has tended to be a lot more dialogue, particularly between mothers and daughters, around racial socialization than with boys, and it looks a little bit different. So what parents do does tend to be a little bit different based on gender. With respect to the first part of your question, there actually is fairly new research that shows that the bias that Black boys experience is different from what, I shouldn't say it's different, but I'll just describe it for you. The research looked at a group of white children and Black children. So white boys, Black boys, white girls, Black girls, and they looked at biases. And what they essentially found was that everybody was more biased towards the Black boys. So the white girls were, the white boys were, the Black girls were. So all of these children are learning biases. So there's biases against Black girls, but even the Black girls were biased against the Black boys. And so the children are learning about bias, and it is a lot more nuanced than we would think that it is. All of it is problematic, which is why we need, again, to have these conversations, to engage in these interactions with children so that we interrupt the development of these biased ideas towards anyone in their classroom or anyone in their lives. So I hope that's helpful to you.
Thank you. And we also have another question from Shamika that I want to make sure that we get to. Shamika is a middle school educator and mom of 5 children, and she wants to know, how can I support this work as both educator and a parent of a 3-year-old? Who wants to take that one from the panel?
Do we know where Shamika's located?
I'm not sure. No, she didn't say. I'm thinking maybe Philly, but I'm not sure.
So I guess I'll see first if anybody else wants to respond before I do. I don't want to assume that I'm the one that's going to respond. Any thoughts? Anybody else? Okay. So
So,
what go ahead,
by the
Carol.
way, Lisa said she's from Philly, so maybe Lisa can jump in and speak somewhere. I think Lisa shared a little bit earlier as well.
Okay, Aisha, how about you finish your point, what you were about to say, and then Lisa, you jump in?
Yeah, so it may sound a little vague, and I don't know how helpful it might be, but where we typically encourage both parents and educators to begin is with themselves. And what I mean by that is in all of our work and all of our trainings, all of our curriculum delivery, we begin by asking people to explore their own racial history, their own racial narrative, their own racial experiences. So what has your experience with race been like? Think about those stories. You can either just keep them in your head or write them down, because those are stories that you can eventually share with your children when you're having those conversations. So when I was growing up, this is what happened to me. This is how I felt. This is what people did to help me or not help me. So you can start with yourself, as well as challenging any of those biases that you may not be aware of. Are there things in my history that have caused me to be biased even towards other Black people, towards people who are a different race than me? But essentially, the beginning point is you doing your own work. And in addition to doing your own internal work, doing your own research and learning so that you can better understand things like the basics of where we get our skin color from. We get it from the sun, we get it from our ancestors, and we get it from melanin. You know, those are basic things that we can begin to learn and understand, and then therefore share with children, either as an educator or as a parent. That information is always useful. A few years ago, Medina and I delivered training to some educational advocates who were working with high schoolers. And we shared that experience of having like a quick and dirty quiz. Where did we get our skin color from? Some of them could answer all three, some of them couldn't. And then they passed that information on to teenagers, and the teenagers told them nobody ever told them where they get their skin color from. So kids are not even learning that basic information all the way through high school. So from pre-K all the way through high school. So they're basically doing your work, doing your research, and then beginning slowly to practice, kind of gradually edging your way into deeper and deeper conversations with children. I hope that helps somewhat.
Shamika, again, so thrilled that you're here with us, representing families as well as educators. As a mama, number one, we invite you and encourage you to download this environmental scan from the First Up website. While you're on the First Up website, know that we have some resources available specifically for families. As I shared, we are piloting our affinity group work with families. So if your child, the 3-year-old, is in a family child care center or an early learning program, let your provider know about the work that's happening and connect us to them. That is a lot of the ways that we do our work at First Up, is in partnership with early childhood programs. Also, I will say the incredible thing is that you are located in Philadelphia. And yes, First Up has this work that we are doing. We do not do a silo in this beautiful community that we are in. There are other organizations here in Philadelphia that are creating racially affirming spaces, right? So we want to connect you to our partners, Black Child Development Institute of Philadelphia. They have incredible work that they are doing that we partner in, whether it's events and other learning opportunities for families. Another really incredible resource that I just want to put out there for you is that the Center for Black Child Educator Development has partnered with Right2Read Philadelphia, and they actually have developed the Black ABCs. Like, I'm talking old school, when Black families used to teach each other the ABCs on the porch front, right? And that news was actually in the Philly Inquirer just yesterday. So if you don't know about that resource, get connected to them. We love the work that they're doing. Then there are other organizations that are out here, Shamika, in Philadelphia. I'll name one more, Arts Without Boundaries, where they are bringing theater experiences to children as young as 3 years old in Philadelphia. The programming is completely free and is happening across different neighborhoods in Philadelphia. So yes, come to us and know that we want to also expand and push you forward to the supportive environment that exists right here in Philadelphia.
All right. Thank you, Dr. White and Lisa. We've got one more question, one last question for the Q&A section before we move on to the next session of our program. And this question was directed towards all panelists. And this is from Sar Mingo. And the question is, are all of your children Black? If there is diversity, how do you address race with all of your students? So I know that with the P.R.I.D.E program in Pittsburgh, our particular focus is centering Black and Africana children and youth, but other folks may have other experiences based on their classrooms and community-based environments. So I invite panelists to share your perspectives on this.
So I'll definitely speak to the P.R.I.D.E in Philly teacher cohort experience, is that we do have a threshold. And so we ask, we prioritize applicants who apply to the teacher cohort to have, to be serving at least 80% of their student population has to represent Black or African-American students. And as a result, we do have participants in the teacher cohort. The folks who were just on the screen, Geneva and Joe, are representing incredible early childhood programs here in Philadelphia, where they are majority Black students, but there's also other children that are representing different racial backgrounds that are part of their classrooms.
I see we have a couple more minutes in this segment, so if it's okay for me to add, I think what was most exciting, or one of the most exciting aspects of this work, was hearing from a Caucasian participant, I believe from Pittsburgh. And what she explained was that she had a classroom of predominantly white children. And the question around how we get our skin color still came up. The project was brilliant. She baked into her lesson plan a science-related activity for the children to explore what I love is now called leminin. So they thought of melanin as a science experiment. And of course, toddlers can't pronounce melanin, so they called it leminin, but very relevant in the sense that they used lemon juice and they used litmus paper. And they took that combination, they placed it in the windows, and magically or scientifically, the paper changed colors. I remember thinking, what a non-biased way to teach children who are just curious about something as scientific as melanin, and what a way to really sort of level the playing field. Because if this is just about science, I can't hate you because of it. And I love the way that P.R.I.D.E continues to support teachers to explore things like hair and how our hair curls or is straight or is different as a result of the environment. I really couldn't imagine how toddlers would have thought about this in the past before discovering this work, and particularly white children. I didn't know how important it was to really go into depth and help explain this in a way that is absolutely culturally sensitive, welcoming. And I thought to myself, these are going to be our future allies. So thank you, Dr. White, Medina, for the work that you have been doing, and the impact that it has on Black children, white children, children of all different diversities and ethnic backgrounds.
All right, thank you all for contributing to the Q&A portion. And we know that all children need a positive racial and cultural identity, especially children of the global majority. And so I want to transition to a call to action by Kelly Brown. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Medina. Good afternoon. My name is Kelly Brown, and I am a Senior Program Officer for William Penn Foundation in Philadelphia. Over the past 6 years, I've had the pleasure of leading a grant-making portfolio with the objective of increasing access to high-quality early childhood education for all of Philadelphia's young children, birth to age 5. As Lisa mentioned earlier, William Penn Foundation became involved in this work as a result of curiosity that was sparked during a First Up conference. We were compelled to support this work because we heard from local ECE stakeholders about the need to redefine quality. Some of you may be in the room today. The P.R.I.D.E work responded to this need for an evolved definition by implementing programming centered on exploring the positive attributes of children of color in a way that is tangible and actionable. While we were funding projects that supported access to high-quality early childhood education, William Penn Foundation did not have a specific strategy or objective centered on racial identity in ECE. We needed to be slightly innovative in our approach to finding alignment with our funding strategy at the time. I'm proud to say that our board agreed that the P.R.I.D.E work was responsive to our goal to support children with diverse needs. Initially, we were getting requests for projects related to diversity and inclusion from an early intervention standpoint. The P.R.I.D.E work really allowed us to stretch a bit and incorporate work in service to the needs of Black children, and I'm so glad that we did. In 2021, we began with an initial award of a little over $400,000 for 2 years. In 2023, we awarded an additional $465,000 for another 2 years of support with the goal of continuing the current work and identifying partnerships with the higher education community. In 2021, First Up approached William Penn Foundation with aspirational goals for the P.R.I.D.E project. They were bold. We had to be sure, however, not to cook the ocean and to take the time to plan and be thoughtful about the work. Fast forward to 2024, and the partnership between P.R.I.D.E Pittsburgh and P.R.I.D.E Philadelphia feels more like family. The team is much more confident and prepared for the next phase of the work to design a transferable credit-bearing positive racial equity-based micro-credential in collaboration with higher education partners. In summary, my call to action is for early childhood education stakeholders and funders who are interested in this work to really be curious, number one, dig deeper into what you learned today, set aside time to visit early learning programs that are practicing this work, like Janaba at the Parent Infant Center. I'm not ashamed to say that during my site visit, just watching her class and watching her lead this work so eloquently, I needed to step outside of the classroom to gather myself after becoming emotional about the remarkable observation of children, caregivers, and educators engaged organically in culturally relevant pedagogy. I would also encourage anyone who is interested in this work to be innovative. In order to do this work, funders, oftentimes we do have to think outside of the box, and we do have to come against barriers related to racism and fear. Oftentimes funders are put in a position to really be bold and to lead on topics that other organizations may not be able to. So I encourage you to continue and think that way. I encourage stakeholders as well to be innovative in your approaches. Maybe you don't have pride in your classroom at this moment, but work with what you have. I would also encourage you to be supportive. Yes, as funders, we were supportive from a financial aspect, but throughout this project, there was support for teachers, for educators, for stakeholders who engaged in this very, very courageous work. There were sometimes tears. This work is very emotional. So remember to be supportive of yourself as well as others who are in this space looking to really break the ground. And be bold. In other words, we needed to temper ourselves. We needed to pace ourselves in order to get to the point where we are now. But by all means, go into this work with a sense of boldness, with a sense of pride, with a sense of responsibility, because if we don't, who will? We, through this work, are really preparing humanity, not just our children, but we are preparing for the humanity of years to come. And I encourage you, by all means, to boldly step in this space so that we have an opportunity to rescue humanity from this current state that we're in. Thank you so much for giving me this time to talk. If there are funders in the room who would want to contact me about how we funded this work more specifically, please reach out. At this time, Lisa Brown will close us out and provide information on how you can continue to engage with us and have all of your questions answered.
Thank you very much, Kelly. So we've received our marching orders for you, and we are looking forward to engaging with every participant in this collective work. At this time, my colleagues are going to put a slide up that is going to display the image of P.R.I.D.E Program 2016 environmental scan, along with the QR code that will direct you to download it. On the same screen, you'll see there's another QR code under the P.R.I.D.E program that will direct you to their website. Similarly, you'll see that we have provided an image of the 2023 P.R.I.D.E Philly environmental scan, along with the QR code to download it, as well as the QR code to be directed to our First Up website. I want to give a special thank you to our fierce leaders and partners in this work who participated as facilitators in today's session. Can we give some Zoom love to Carol Austin, Kelly Brown, Dr. Aisha White, Medina Jackson, Jessica Cochran, Jerome Morris, Katie Carroll, Jennifer Dior, Joe Grin, and the entire First Up team. We also want to take a quick moment to recognize our generous funders, the William Penn Foundation, who is our lead supporter, and PNC Grow Up Great. This work would not be possible without your support. Lastly, as we're wrapping up, our team is going to drop a QR code, actually a link in the chat box, and we are asking you to please go ahead and fill out our feedback and partnership survey. What's going to happen is by completing this brief form, funders will have the opportunity to get directly connected with Kelly. Philadelphia partner organizations and families and educators can engage with First Up. And if you're interested in replicating this work in your city, we would love to connect you with Dr. White and the P.R.I.D.E program. For those of you who missed any part of today's session or would like to revisit the information, we'll send out a recording as well as the webinar via email, so be on the lookout. Lastly, to all of you, the families, caregivers, educators, leaders, funders, and partners in this work, we just want to say thank you for your engagement and commitment to young children in Philadelphia. We look forward to continuing this journey together. Thank you.